Okay, my name's Susan Wilson, or Susie as my family know me. I'm a graphic designer, an artist. Currently I work for Monster Energy Drinks. So I work from home remotely, but I do go down to headquarters in London a few times a year and sometimes travel overseas with them.
That's absolutely great. Okay, what's your relationship with Silverburn?
Yes, so I started work at Lethem Glen and Silverburn via the council when I was 19 or 20. It's a little bit vague about which year that was, 83 or 84. And I was there for a few years while the council were still funding the projects. Started off as a nature warden, and so in the winter months when it was a bit cold, we would draw up beautiful nature boards for the centres in both sites. We didn't have computers in them days, so it was all hand drawn and hand painted, really lovely to do. And then in the spring and summer months, when the weather got a bit better, we would have visits from schools. They would bring groups of school children, and so we would take them out on nature walks, identifying trees and birds and creatures and insects as we went. So we made little blocks for the trees and had the head groundskeepers nail them to some of the trees, and they had a trail of bark rubbing that they would do and try to identify the trees, the little sheet that they would have. I started to spend more time at Silverburn when we got the mini farm, and then they had the corral which held various different beasts. We had a donkey called Penny, we had a cow, I can't remember its name actually, and a red horse called Ginger. It was a retired horse, quite big, and we would have the farrier come in every so often to trim their hoofs and shoe them. We also had like lop-eared rabbits and a boar called Jock, who had quite big tusks, and various chickens, cautions, and all sorts of different kinds of birds that the children could come along and handle. And that was really lovely for them. They were able to come along and get a really hands-on experience and learn to appreciate the animals around them. There's a few funny stories from when I used to do the art for the nature centre at Silverburn. There was lovely big boards that stood within the space, and around the edges of the walls there was like insect feely boxes and all sorts of interactive games that the kids could play when they were here, just getting them to learn a bit more about animal life. Well, one day the farrier came to trim the hoofs of the donkey and the horse, and we had Shetland ponies as well, I'll get to that. But Ginger, the big horse, was not for it this day and he escaped. He got out of the corral, he was chased around the grounds for about 2 hours, and at one point during that time he actually got inside the nature centre and knocked all the boards flying. And when he was eventually captured and brought back, the farrier was like, "I won't be doing his hoofs today."
Can I just ask, whereabouts was the nature centre?
Yeah, so do you know where the toilets are at the moment for the camping? And if you're standing on the ramp facing away from the toilets, there's a building there that you can now see the end of. There used to be a little pathway that went round there, and that's where the nature centre office was. And then within that courtyard there was a corral built for the animals to be inside during a day when kids would be coming from schools. And all around about that corral were sheds that were partitioned off, and those had different various animals within them.
So they weren't actually inside the flax mill?
There were stables inside the flax mill.
Right.
Yeah, so the horse and the Shetland, well, sometimes Shetland ponies were out in the fields, actually. They lived pretty much in the fields. But the bigger animals, bigger horse and stuff, would come into the stables that were in there. I'm not sure if they were in there overnight all the time, because the grounds were kept so beautifully by the council at that point in time, and the fields were really lovely. So the Shetland ponies were mostly in the fields that I knew of. I think they only really brought the horses and donkey and stuff into the stables when the farrier was going to be coming to do their necessary manicures and pedicures. And so the weekends were always quite busy. I worked mostly during the week, but we took turns of working weekends as well, to allow the children to come and have fun handling the animals, you know. We had the boar that was with us for a while, Jock. He was hilarious. He was quite cantankerous. And we had a YTS guy start, that was like youth training scheme at the time, and he was red-headed. I can't remember his name, bless him. And Jock took an instant dislike to this guy. He was in there cleaning out his stall, and Jock went for him and unfortunately got him with his tusks, and he had to go and have medical attention. So he never went in beside Jock again after that. So in the nature centre, they would be allowed to come inside some of the stalls where we had the big lop-eared rabbits and sit and handle them and pet them. And they absolutely loved this. They really did. They really loved it. Or they would go into where the chickens were kept and check for eggs to see if there was any eggs laid. And then one of the groundskeepers used to have a little room at the back side of the building which faces to the path where the cafe is. And he had in there a little incubation room where occasionally they would allow some eggs to incubate, and so the kids could come and see various stages of that process, from when the eggs were laid right through until the new wee chicks were born. And there were geese as well by the pond, where the pond is now. And one of the groundskeepers used to feed them occasionally from time to time, and so you would have a procession of these geese coming right along the path, knowing it was dinner time, getting ready to be fed. So that was lovely.
So, what would you say about the importance of Silverburn at that time?
Oh gosh, I mean, it was such a rich place for kids to be able to come and learn about animal welfare and nature in a really kind of friendly and down to earth way. It wasn't too formal. There was little colouring in sheets that we developed for them to be able to do, and of course the bark ribbon trails. We would have little insect tanks that had insects in them, and then they would see which one was which, and they would, at the Glenmore for that, where the Dewcot is now, or used to be, it used to be a rabbit place, and for a while that was our sort of insect area, and so there was lots of centipedes and worms and all sorts of things, and we'd put little bits of old rotten trees there so that they could lift up and see all these different creatures and try and identify them. We also planted everlasting flowers with the kids from school, so they would come for a day. That was mostly at the Glen though, on the hill behind the nature centre there was a little patch, and so they would get that cultivated. The kids would come along and plant their seeds. They would maybe come once or twice to water them, and then they would come towards the end of the season where the flowers were up and ready for them to cut and either just use like that, or some of them, we had a net in the nature centre that they could put the flowers into and allow them to dry, and then they could come along and collect them from there. So that was nice as well.
What happened?
The council ran out of money, basically. Their budgets were squeezed and squeezed and squeezed. And so they just decided that they couldn't financially keep it going anymore. And that was when I decided, okay, I've done these type of jobs now for a while since I left school. My art teacher wanted me to go straight to art college, but I wanted to earn money. So that's what I did for a while. But when this closed, effectively, I thought, do you know, it's time to go to college now. So that's when I went to do my degree in art at Edinburgh. But I'll tell you, I still look back so fondly on my time as a nature warden at both sites. It was just one of the best jobs I've ever had, really. It was wonderful. I lived overseas for a while as well, but if I ever came back, it's one of my favourite places to come. And I would have a walk round and see these grounds slowly. Nature reclaiming the gardens was one thing. These gardens were immaculate when I worked there. We had one of the council guys was a man called Bill Duncan. Don't know if you know him. He came from along the coast, and he was on Gardener's World and things like that. He was very particular about the grounds, and he had a team of groundsmen who made this place absolutely perfect. They also had at Carberry House at that point in time, they had nurseries, so they grew plants and flowers and stuff like that. And we did the spring bulb show from Silverburn. There was a little mascot called Oscar, and he was shaped like a chicken, and he was covered in oasis. And I had to sit for 2 days, and this very handsome young Italian man who's still in the area called Tony Doriano, who was a young trainee gardener at the time, had to pick me marigolds for 2 days straight. And I would sit and pop them in and make this face of the bird that we took over to, I think it was Meadowbank Stadium at that point in time. Yeah, it was lovely. It was really lovely. So to see the place starting to really go downhill and the buildings start to decay, it was just like, oh, this is such a shame, because it was such a revered site for families and visitors alike, you know, to come along and spend some time here.
What do you think about the changes that are going on now?
Oh, I'm so excited for it. I think it's wonderful to have a new centre for people to come along and interact with and be part of. I'm not exactly sure everything that's going to be in there. From what I remember reading, it's going to have the Flax Mill Museum and a cafe, hostel, perhaps an art space, which that's quite exciting, I think, if that's definitely going ahead. I did. Yes. I used to visit when I was younger, but when I was younger, the nature centres weren't really very a big thing. They had the odd show there, but like literally when I was a child, I would be riding around there on my push bike and things. It wasn't until I actually got into my teen years and realised the council were running it, and then saw the job application, the post for the nature warden, I thought this would be the best job ever. I remember going to the interview, and there was a lady called Joan Brasnell who I worked with for a couple of years with her here, and I was sitting there and I'd had my nails all done nice, and she was looking at me, and I was like, don't worry, Joan, I'm not scared to get my hands dirty, it's fine. And I think that swung it. Oh, if I had my way, I would love to have the petting zoo back, because I think it's just so lovely for the children to be able to interact with animals. And there's a few things around the area with not llamas, what are they called, the other ones? Alpacas and things, isn't there, in some areas outside of the town. But honestly, to have that little petting zoo again that would just fill my heart with joy. It was so lovely. But I do understand that there's a lot of costs and upkeep, and you need people who understand animals and can look after them. We had a troop of Shetland ponies. There was a few of them. There was Katie, Kirsty, Ginger, I can't remember, there was another couple, but I can't remember all their names. But I was actually taught how to tack these horses to a little cart, and actually take kids for a little ride on them. So round the grounds we went, and sometimes we would even take them in a horse box to schools in various areas and allow them to come and pet them or have a little ride on the cart. We took them over to Meadowbank Stadium with the Spring Bulb Show one year. So we were quite involved with them. But the little red one, God bless him, had a penchant for biting my bum if I was going to go, because we groomed them as well, and we let the kids groom them too.
Absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much.
I'm so happy to have helped. Yeah.